She could see his future before he could even see tomorrow. But her gift came with a price and a promise that would change his life forever. David had always been the kind of guy who planned everything. At 34, his life ran like clockwork. Wake up at 6, gym by 7, at his desk by 8:30. He worked at a tech company in Silicon Valley, writing code and building systems that most people wouldn't understand, even if he spent hours explaining them. 2 years ago, his wife had left him. She said he was married to his work, that he never really saw her. Maybe she was right. After the divorce, David decided relationships were too complicated, too messy. Code made sense. People didn't, so he stopped trying. His apartment reflected this new philosophy. Everything was clean, minimal, organized. White walls, black furniture, no photos on the shelves. Just his laptop, his books about artificial intelligence, and a coffee maker that probably worked harder than it should. Life was predictable, and predictable felt safe. Then one Tuesday in October, everything changed. The company hired someone new for his team. Her name was Aria, and from the moment she walked into the conference room, David knew she was different. Not in an obvious way. She wasn't loud or flashy. She just had this presence, like she was paying attention to everything and everyone at a level that felt almost uncomfortable. During her first meeting, while everyone else was introducing themselves and making small talk, Aria barely said anything. She just watched, her dark eyes moving from person to person, taking mental notes that David could practically see forming in her head. When it was finally her turn to speak, she stood up and said something that made everyone in the room go quiet. "I see patterns that other people miss. In data, sure, but also in people. In the way systems work, in the way problems develop before they become obvious. I can usually tell you what's going to happen before it happens." Someone laughed nervously. Another person made a joke about her being psychic. But Aria didn't smile. She just looked directly at David and said, "For example, the system you're building right now? It's going to crash in 3 weeks if you don't change the architecture of the memory allocation module. Not because of the code you wrote, but because of how it interacts with the updates the infrastructure team is planning to push next month." David felt his chest tighten. How could she possibly know that? The infrastructure team's plans weren't even public yet, and the memory issue she mentioned, he'd been vaguely worried about it but hadn't told anyone. After the meeting, he pulled up his code and started digging deeper. The more he looked, the more he realized she was right. Completely right. If he didn't fix this, the whole system would collapse in a few weeks. Exactly like she said. Over the next few weeks, David found himself working closely with Aria. She'd been assigned to his project, and honestly, she was brilliant. But it was a strange kind of brilliant. She didn't just solve problems, she saw them coming from miles away. "Why are you rewriting that function?" she'd ask, looking over his shoulder. "Just optimizing it," David would reply. "Don't bother. The client is going to change their requirements in 4 days, and you'll have to redo all of it anyway. Work on the database queries instead. That's where the real bottleneck is going to be." And she was always right. Always. It started to freak him out a little. But there was something else about Aria that David noticed. Sometimes, in the middle of explaining something complex, she'd pause. Her eyes would lose focus for just a second, like she was trying to grab a word that had slipped away from her. Then she'd shake her head slightly and continue as if nothing had happened. And the doctor's appointments. She took a lot of them. At least twice a week she'd disappear for a few hours, coming back looking tired, sometimes a little shaken. David was curious, but he didn't ask. People had their private lives, their private struggles. He respected that. 3 months into working together, something shifted between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was more like recognition, like two people who spoke the same language suddenly realizing they'd been surrounded by people who didn't. They started having lunch together, long lunches where they'd talk about artificial intelligence, about consciousness, about whether machines could ever truly think, or if they were just really good at pretending. "What do you think happens to our thoughts when we die?" Aria asked him one day out of nowhere. David put down his sandwich. "That's a heavy question for a Tuesday. I'm serious. All these patterns we recognize, these memories we build, these ways of thinking that make us who we are, where do they go?" "Nowhere," David said honestly. "They just stop. The brain shuts down and that's it." Aria looked sad when he said that. Really sad in a way that made David wish he'd lied. Said something comforting instead. "What if they didn't have to?" she said quietly. What if we could preserve them somehow? Not the whole person, but the essence, the patterns, the way someone thinks and sees the world? That's not possible, David said. Not with current technology. But theoretically? Theoretically? Maybe in 50 years, 100 years. But not now. Arya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. 50 years, she repeated. That's a long time. That conversation stuck with David. There was something desperate in the way Arya had asked those questions. Something that made him think she wasn't just being philosophical. A few weeks later, on a Friday evening when everyone else had gone home, David was still at his desk, debugging code that refused to cooperate. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Arya standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're going to be here all night if you keep approaching it that way," she said, handing him one of the cups. "You have a better idea?" "Always." She pulled up a chair next to him. "But first I need to tell you something. Something important." The way she said it made David's stomach drop. This was it. Whatever secret she'd been carrying, whatever explained the doctor visits and the sad questions about consciousness, she was about to share it. "I'm sick," Arya said simply. "I have a condition. It's neurological, really rare. Only a few hundred cases in the world." David set down his coffee, giving her his full attention. "The condition, it does something to my brain. It makes me process information differently. All those patterns I see, all those predictions I make, it's not magic or intuition. It's my brain working overtime, processing thousands of tiny details that most people's brains filter out. Micro-expressions, environmental cues, data patterns. My brain connects them all, shows me probabilities, likely outcomes. It's like seeing a few frames ahead in a movie." "That's incredible," David said. "It's also killing me," Arya replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. "The condition is progressive. My brain is working too hard, burning itself out. Eventually I'll start losing function. Memory, language, recognition. Everything that makes me me. The doctors say I have a few years, maybe less." David felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "There has to be treatment. Surgery, medication, something." "There's nothing. I've seen every specialist, tried every experimental treatment. This is it. This is what I get." They sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of computers filling the empty office around them. "Why are you telling me this?" David finally asked. Arya turned to look at him directly, and in her eyes, David saw something that made his breath catch. Determination, purpose, hope. "Because I came here for you, David. Specifically for you. I've been watching you, studying you, understanding how you think and work. And I've seen something, a future, a possibility, something we could build together that would matter, that would last beyond both of us. I don't understand." "You will," Arya said. "Just give me time. Let me stay close to you. Let me into your work, your life. I promise you, David, I can give you a future that no one else can. I can see things others can't, and I want to use that gift while I still have it. For you, for us, for something bigger." David should have said no, should have kept his walls up, maintained his safe, predictable life. But looking at this woman who could see patterns in chaos, who was racing against time itself, who had chosen him for reasons he didn't yet understand, he found himself nodding. "Okay," he said. "Show me what you see." Arya smiled then, really smiled. And for the first time since meeting her, David saw genuine joy on her face. Neither of them knew it yet. But that moment, that simple okay, would change everything. The first week of really working together was intense. Arya didn't waste time. She showed up at David's apartment on Saturday morning with a laptop, 3 notebooks, and a bag of groceries. "What are you doing?" David asked, still in his pajamas, confused by the invasion. "We're starting now," Arya said, pushing past him into the kitchen. "You eat terribly, by the way. Your fridge has energy drinks and leftover takeout. That's going to change. Excuse me. Your brain is your most important tool, David. You can't build revolutionary technology while running on garbage fuel. So I'm teaching you how to eat properly. Also, you're sleeping wrong. I'm sleeping wrong. Your REM cycles are off. I can tell by the bags under your eyes and the way you're slower to process complex problems after lunch. We're fixing your schedule." David wanted to argue, wanted to tell her this was too much, too fast. But something about the way Arya moved through his apartment, purposeful and certain, made him curious enough to let it happen. She cooked breakfast. Real breakfast, eggs and vegetables and whole grain toast. While they ate, she pulled out her notebooks and started explaining. The project we're working on at the company, it's fine. It'll make money. It'll be useful. But it's thinking too small. What we should be building, what we could build if we're smart about it, is something that changes how humans and technology interact at a fundamental level. Like what? Neural interfaces. Not the crude ones that exist now, but something elegant, something that doesn't just read brain signals but understands them, interprets intention, preserves thought patterns, maybe eventually helps people with cognitive conditions maintain their sense of self. David leaned back in his chair. That's science fiction. We're decades away from that. 5 years, Arya said confidently. Maybe 7 if we hit major obstacles. I've mapped it out. I know which research teams are about to make breakthroughs, which technologies are converging, which dead ends to avoid. I've seen the pattern, David. We're standing at exactly the right moment in time to do this. And you need me because you're the perfect combination of skills and personality for this. You're brilliant with systems architecture. You think in layers and connections, and you're obsessive enough to see things through. Plus, you've been hurt enough to understand why preserving consciousness and identity matters. Your ex-wife, she said you never really saw her. You see everything now. You pay attention. That's rare. David felt exposed, like Arya had read his diary. How do you know about my ex-wife? Public records, LinkedIn? The way you flinched when someone mentioned marriage at the office party? Little things that add up to big pictures. She reached across the table and touched his hand gently. I'm not trying to manipulate you, David. I'm trying to be honest. I have limited time and I need to work with someone I trust. Someone who can carry this forward when I can't anymore. When you can't anymore, David repeated quietly. The reality of her condition, of the clock ticking down, hit him again. They spent the whole weekend planning. Arya had everything mapped out in her notebooks. Research papers to read, patents to file, people to contact. She'd been preparing for this for months, maybe longer. How long have you known about me? David asked on Sunday evening. 8 months. I researched 53 candidates before settling on you. You were the only one with the right combination of factors. That should creep me out. But it doesn't, Arya observed. Because part of you has been waiting for something like this. Some purpose bigger than just writing code for corporate projects. She was right. David had been drifting since his divorce, going through motions, building things that didn't really matter. This, what Arya was proposing, it felt like waking up. Over the next few months, they fell into a rhythm. David would work his regular job during the day, then come home to find Arya already there, having let herself in with the spare key he'd given her. They'd work on their own project until late into the night. She'd moved in gradually. First, it was just coming over to work, then staying for dinner, then sleeping on his couch because it was too late to go home. Then one day, David realized her clothes were in his closet and her toothbrush was in his bathroom, and he couldn't remember exactly when that had happened. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt natural. But they weren't a couple. Not exactly. They worked together, lived together, but there was this careful distance Arya maintained, like she was holding back, keeping something in reserve. Why won't you let me get close? David asked one night, frustrated after weeks of this strange intimacy that never quite became what he wanted it to be. Arya was quiet for a long time. Because I'm going to break your heart, she finally said. Not on purpose. Not because I want to, but because I'm dying, David, slowly but certainly. And if you fall in love with me, really love me, watching what happens to me is going to destroy you. Maybe I should get to decide that. Maybe. But I've already seen how this goes. I've run the patterns, looked at the probabilities. In 6 months, you'll be in love with me. In a year, we'll be inseparable. In 2 years, I'll start forgetting words in the middle of sentences. In 3 years, I won't remember your name. David felt tears burning in his eyes. Then let's have the 6 months. Let's have the year. Whatever time there is, let's actually have it instead of holding back. Arya looked at him with such sadness and such hope mixed together that David's heart ached. You're sure? I'm sure. She kissed him then, finally, and it felt like something breaking open and healing at the same time. Their relationship changed after that night. The careful distance disappeared. Arya stopped holding back, and David discovered that loving someone who could see the future was both wonderful and terrible. She knew what he needed before he knew it himself. Knew when he was stressed and needed space, when he was spiraling and needed grounding. She'd leave notes around the apartment with predictions. You're going to want to quit the project around 3 p.m. today. Don't push through. The breakthrough comes at 5:47, and she was always right. Their work accelerated. Arya introduced David to researchers she'd identified as crucial. A neuroscientist in Boston who was mapping consciousness patterns, an engineer in Tokyo working on biocompatible interfaces, a programmer in Berlin who'd solved a critical data compression problem. "How did you know about all these people?" David asked. "I read everything. Every paper, every patent filing, every conference presentation. And I see the connections. Who's going to collaborate with who? Which ideas are going to merge and create something new?" Within 6 months, they had enough for a patent application. Within 9 months, investors were interested. Within a year, David and Arya had turned their side project into a real company. But as their professional success grew, David noticed the changes Arya had warned him about. Small things at first. She'd pause longer when searching for words. Sometimes she'd forget what she was saying mid-sentence and have to retrace her thoughts. "It's starting," she said one night, after losing her train of thought 3 times during dinner. David wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. The brilliant woman who saw patterns in everything was starting to lose her grip on her own mind. "We need to work faster," Arya said urgently. "I need to document everything while I still can. All the patterns I see, all the predictions, all the guidance you'll need after I'm gone." "Don't talk like that. We have to talk like that. This is real, David. And I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I can't think clearly anymore, when I can't be your partner in this work, don't give up. Finish what we started. Make it matter. Make sure that even if I'm gone, the future I saw for you still happens." David pulled her close, holding her tight. "I promise." They worked even harder after that, racing against time itself. The next year was the best and worst of David's life. Best because he'd never felt so alive, so purposeful. Worst because he could see Arya slipping away, bit by bit, even as they achieved incredible things together. Their company grew. They hired a small team, found lab space, started running experiments on their neural interface technology. Arya was the heart of everything. She'd walk into a meeting and within minutes identify problems others couldn't see, suggest solutions no one else would think of. But the bad moments came more frequently now. She'd forget people's names. Sometimes she'd repeat the same story twice in one conversation. Once, she called David by her brother's name and didn't even notice until he gently corrected her. Each incident broke something inside him. But Arya refused to slow down. "I'm documenting everything," she told him. She'd started recording voice memos, writing detailed notes about patterns she observed, creating what she called her prediction database. Hundreds of insights about their technology, their industry, about David himself. "You're going to face challenges I won't be here to help you navigate," she explained. "So I'm preparing you, teaching you to see patterns the way I do." David tried to learn, but he wasn't like her. He couldn't see 20 steps ahead. Couldn't intuitively understand how unrelated events would connect. But he tried. God, he tried. Their relationship deepened even as Arya's condition worsened. They got engaged, a quiet moment in their apartment. No fancy ring or elaborate proposal. Just Arya saying, "I want to marry you while I still know who you are," and David saying yes through tears. They never made it to a wedding. Arya's decline accelerated faster than the doctors predicted. One morning, David woke up to find Arya standing in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I can't remember how it works," she said, her voice small and confused. David's heart shattered. She'd made coffee 1,000 times. The woman who could predict technological breakthroughs couldn't remember how to make coffee. He helped her, guided her hands through the familiar motions. She cried quietly the whole time. "It's getting bad," she whispered. "Faster than I thought." The team at the company started to notice. Arya would lose track of conversations, struggle with concepts that used to be second nature to her. David covered for her as much as he could, taking on more of her responsibilities, making excuses for her absences, but he couldn't protect her from the truth. Her brilliant mind was betraying her. One evening, she sat David down with a laptop and a stack of hard drives. "This is everything," she said, speaking slowly and carefully, like each word required effort. "My notes, my predictions, my analysis of you, the company, the technology, the future. I've organized it, indexed it. You can search by topic, by date, by probability level. Arya, listen, please. I don't have many clear moments left. You need to hear this." She took his hands. I've seen your future, David. Not all of it, I'm not that good. But enough. You're going to want to give up in about 18 months. There'll be a betrayal. Someone on the team trying to steal the technology. Don't let it break you. There's a workaround I've documented. I don't care about the company right now. I care about you. The company is me. It's my legacy. It's the part of me that gets to continue. Tears ran down her face. I wish I could stay. I wish I could see you build everything I've predicted. But I can't. So I'm giving you the next best thing. A roadmap. My final gift. David pulled her into his arms, both of them crying now. You're the gift. Not the predictions, not the company. You. Then promise me you'll finish this. Promise me you'll trust what I've left you. Even when it seems impossible. Promise me you'll find happiness again with someone who can actually stay. I can't promise that last one. You can. You will. Her name will start with M. She'll work in ethics or law, something that balances your technical focus. You'll meet her at a conference in about 4 years. She'll understand about me, about what we built. She'll be good for you, David. Let her in when the time comes. You can't possibly know that. I've run the patterns. The probability is 73%. That's high enough. She smiled weakly. Trust me one last time. I haven't been wrong yet. Over the next few weeks, Arya's condition deteriorated rapidly. The woman who could see the future couldn't remember the past. She'd look at David sometimes with confusion, not quite placing who he was. Then recognition would flood back and she'd cry because she knew what that moment of confusion meant. The medical team recommended full-time care. A specialized facility where she could be safe, where professionals could manage her condition as it progressed. I don't want to put you in a home, David said, even though he knew it was necessary. It's not a home, Arya corrected in one of her last truly clear moments. It's a place where I'll be safe while you build our future. You can't do this work and take care of me. I've seen those timelines. In those versions, you give up everything for me and neither of us gets what we want. I don't care. I care. This has to matter, David. My life has to matter for more than just the time I got with you. Promise me you'll keep going, he promised. What else could he do? The day they moved Arya to the care facility was the hardest day of David's life. Worse than his divorce. Worse than anything he'd experienced. She was having a bad day, confused and agitated. She didn't understand why he was packing her things. Kept asking why he was angry with her. I'm not angry, David said over and over. I love you. I'm taking you somewhere safe. But I want to stay with you. I know. I want that too. But this is what's best. At the facility, Arya had a moment of clarity as David was saying goodbye. She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. The code is, remember the patterns, she said urgently. When you access my files, that's the password. And David, thank you for letting me stay as long as you did. Thank you for the future you're going to build. Then the clarity faded and she looked at him like a stranger. David drove home in a daze, the words, let me stay, echoing in his head. She'd asked to stay in his life and he'd said yes. And now she was gone, even though her body remained. That night, alone in the apartment that still smelled like her, David opened her laptop and typed in the password. Remember the patterns, thousands of files opened up, years of work, predictions about technology, about their company, about him, detailed notes on challenges he'd face, decisions he'd need to make, personal messages recorded for specific future dates. There was a video file labeled, Watch This First. David clicked it. Arya's face appeared on screen, from months ago when she'd still been herself. She looked tired but determined. Hi, David, the recording said. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. Not dead probably, but gone in all the ways that matter. I know you're hurting. I know you want to give up on everything we built. Don't. The recording continued, Arya talking directly to him about their project, about the future she'd seen for him, about why it all mattered. You think I was the special one, she said on screen. But it was always you, David. I just saw it first. You're going to build something beautiful and important and revolutionary, and I'm so grateful I got to see the beginning of it. The video ended with Arya smiling. See you in the patterns. That's where I'll live now. In the work we did together. In the future you're going to build. I love you. Now get to work. David sat in the dark, his laptop glowing, surrounded by the ghost of Arya's brilliance. And slowly, painfully, he began to understand what she'd given him. Not just predictions or business plans, but purpose, direction. a future carefully architected by someone who'd loved him enough to see past her own mortality. He opened a new file and started working. For her, for himself, for the future she'd promised him. The first year without Arya was brutal. David threw himself into the work, because when he stopped moving, the grief would catch up and pull him under. The company needed him. Their neural interface project was at a critical stage, and investors were getting nervous about Arya's absence. David told them she was on medical leave. He didn't specify that she wouldn't be coming back. He visited her 3 times a week at the care facility. Most days she didn't know him. Sometimes she'd smile vaguely when he walked in, a polite smile for a stranger. Other times she'd be agitated, asking questions that didn't make sense, talking to people who weren't there. The worst visits were the ones where she'd have a flicker of recognition. "I know you," she'd say, confused. "You're important." "Why can't I remember?" "It's okay," David would tell her. "You don't have to remember." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about it was okay. He found solace in Arya's files. Late at night, he'd go through her predictions, her analyses. She'd mapped out the next 5 years of their company's development with remarkable accuracy. Which investors to approach, which technical challenges they'd face and how to solve them, which team members to trust and which would eventually leave or betray them. At first, David was skeptical. How could she have known all this? But as months passed and her predictions kept proving correct, he started to trust it. Started to see the patterns she'd seen. 6 months after Arya went into care, something happened that she'd specifically warned him about. One of their senior engineers, someone David had trusted completely, was caught trying to sell their proprietary technology to a competitor. David was devastated, ready to give up, shut down the whole company. Then he remembered Arya's notes. She'd predicted this exact betrayal, down to the specific engineer and the approximate timing. More importantly, she'd left instructions. "Don't press charges," she'd written. "He has a sick daughter. He's desperate, not evil. Let him go quietly, but implement the security protocols I've outlined. The real threat comes from the competitor who approached him. Cut them off before they can do more damage." David followed her instructions exactly. The engineer left with a severance package. David strengthened their security. And he felt Arya's presence in that decision, her wisdom guiding him even though she couldn't speak anymore. The company grew. David hired new people, developed new technologies. The neural interface they designed was revolutionary, elegant in a way that competitors couldn't replicate. Because they didn't have Arya's vision, didn't understand the deeper patterns she'd seen. 2 years after Arya's decline, David was invited to speak at a major tech conference. He almost didn't go. Public speaking had never been his strength. But Arya's notes had a specific entry about this conference. "You'll meet someone important there," she'd written. "Not for the company, for you. Her name starts with M. She'll ask you a question about consciousness preservation. Pay attention." David had read that note dozens of times, never quite believing it, but he went to the conference anyway. On the second day, during a panel discussion about AI ethics, a woman in the audience raised her hand. She was younger than David, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes and a thoughtful expression. "I'm Maya," she said. "I work in bioethics. My question is about the consciousness preservation technology your company is developing. How do you balance the technical possibilities with the ethical implications? At what point does preserving thought patterns become an attempt to cheat death rather than help the living?" David's heart stopped. Her name starts with M. She works in ethics. He answered her question as thoughtfully as he could, and afterward she approached him. "That was a good answer," Maya said. "Most tech people dismiss the ethical concerns. You didn't." "I can't afford to," David replied. "This technology, it's personal for me. Someone I loved, she had a condition that destroyed her mind. This work started as a way to preserve what we were losing." They talked for an hour, then 2 hours. Maya was brilliant, challenging, asked questions that made David think differently about his work. And she was genuinely interested, not just in the technology but in the human stories behind it. "I'd like to visit your facility," Maya said, "if that's allowed. I'm writing a paper on the ethics of consciousness technology, and your approach seems more thoughtful than most." David agreed. Over the next few months, Maya became a consultant for the company, helping them navigate the complex ethical landscape of their work. She also became David's friend. Then something more. He fought it at first, felt guilty, like moving forward meant betraying Arya. But there was a file in Arya's database labeled "For When You Meet Maya." David opened it one night, hands shaking. "Hi, David," Arya's recorded voice said. "If you're watching this, you've met her. The woman I told you about. And you're feeling guilty about being interested in her. Don't." The recording showed Arya looking directly into the camera, speaking with the authority she'd had before her decline. "I loved you enough to want you to be happy after I'm gone. Not just professionally happy, but actually happy. This woman, Maya, she's good for you. She balances your technical focus with humanistic concerns. She'll understand what we built together without being threatened by it. She's the future I want for you." Arya smiled on the screen. "I spent so much time predicting futures for our technology, for our company. But I also wanted to predict a future where you're okay, where you find love again. This is it, David. This is that future. Take it. I'm giving it to you." The video ended and David sat there crying. Grief and gratitude mixed together until he couldn't tell which was which. He called Maya that night and asked her to dinner. Not as a colleague. As something more. "I need to tell you something first," David said when they met. "About the person who started this company with me. About Arya." He told Maya everything. About Arya's condition, her extraordinary abilities, how she'd mapped out futures she'd never see. About the predictions she'd left behind, including the one about Maya herself. "That should be creepy," Maya said slowly. "Someone predicting our meeting. But somehow it's not. It's just sad. And kind of beautiful. You're okay with it? With being someone else's prediction? I'm okay with being part of a future that someone cared enough to map out for the person they loved," Maya said. "That's not creepy. That's love." They started dating carefully, respectfully, both aware of the ghost that blessed their relationship rather than haunted it. David still visited Arya at the facility. He told her about Maya, about the company's progress, about how her predictions kept proving true. She didn't understand anymore, couldn't engage with what he was saying, but he needed to tell her anyway. 3 years after Arya's decline, the company achieved its first major breakthrough. They developed a neural interface that could help people with early-stage cognitive conditions maintain their memories and thought patterns. Not by uploading consciousness, which was still science fiction, but by creating external support systems that worked with damaged brains. It was exactly what Arya had envisioned. The technology she'd predicted, delivered on the timeline she'd outlined. David named it the Arya Protocol. When the press asked why, he told them about the woman who'd seen patterns no one else could, who'd used her gift to change the world even as she lost herself. The story went viral, not for the technology alone, but for the human story behind it. The woman who'd seen her own future and chose to give someone else a better one. Maya helped David handle the attention, the sudden fame. She also helped him navigate the complicated emotions of success mixed with grief. "You did it," she said one night after a particularly successful product launch. "You built what she saw. You made her vision real." "We built it," David corrected. "You've been part of this for 2 years now." "This is yours too." "It's all of ours," Maya agreed. "Arya's vision, your work, my ethics framework. That's how the best things get built. Together across time with love as the foundation." David realized she was right. The future Arya had given him wasn't just about technology. It was about connection. About building something that mattered with people who cared. That night he added a new file to Arya's database. Not a prediction, but a thank you. A record of everything he'd built because of her. Everything she'd given him by asking him to trust her vision. "You were right about everything," he wrote. "The betrayal, the breakthrough, even Maya. You saw it all and you left me a roadmap to navigate it. I don't know if any part of you still exists somewhere, in patterns or consciousness or just in the work we did together. But wherever you are, I hope you can see this. I hope you know your future came true." He saved the file and closed the laptop, then turned to where Maya was reading on the couch. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being part of the future someone loved me enough to predict." Maya smiled and made room for him on the couch. And for the first time since Arya's decline, David felt something like peace.